Hello, welcome. My name is Karen. We're going to be going through a series of workshops that talk about just understanding how money works and just some money management in general. As you know, a lot of people have gone through some difficult times. Stress is over the top sometimes, especially in the area of finances. So I pray that as you listen to this information, you will be able to take away something, and may God give you the wisdom and understanding to make some differences in your life. So stay tuned as the workshop starts. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. This is Karen Gorenser. I'm just recording my podcast. I start off in the chair first. I'm going to talk about my story and, just rising from the ashes. I have a crowd of people here to support me in this process, so I'm not just staring at a camera. So thanks for being here, you guys. I really appreciate it. So now I'm getting married at a young age and having a family of my own. I look back at my wedding pictures and there's no happiness. Like, I know my face when I'm happy, right? It's just it's like I'm playing a part. I'm just like there's like nothing there, like just this emptiness, right? I had a traumatic birth with my first son, and he was colicky and we didn't connect the way we should have. His father was not a loving kind of parent. He wouldn't help. Like, he didn't change diapers, he didn't get up through the night, he didn't help me with anything. And I was just constantly crying. I didn't know how to raise this kid. I didn't know how to keep it alive. I was so afraid. I wanted my own mom to help me, and his mom and I were not close, so I never asked her. And one day I was crying so much. I lived in a condo in Castle Downs, and the neighbor next door heard me crying, and she rang my door and she asked if I was okay. And I said, well, I don't know what's the matter with my kid. He's just crying all the time. I don't think I'm feeding him properly. I didn't have enough breast milk and stuff. And she said, well, her baby was 6 months older. And she said, do you want me to feed him? That's pretty hard to see, somebody else feeding your baby. Well, he cleaned her out and he slept for 4 hours. So I knew that was the problem. Anyway, but before this happened, like, the other thing that I was crying about is one day my ex-husband and I, we were leaving to go get groceries, and the baby's screaming. And he picked up that car seat and he shook it violently. And the baby was like maybe 2 months old, right? And I just remember, your mama bear kicks in, right? And I just remember I grabbed the car seat, I shoved him, put the car seat down. When I stood up, he punched me. And I fell and was stunned for a second. And then I left. I took the baby and left, and I went to his aunt and uncle's place, who I was close to. Notice I had no family I could go to. I had cousins and an aunt and uncle who lived here, but yeah, it just didn't seem like it was the right place to be. Anyway, he said sorry, so I went back. This is the other pattern, right? Abusive people apologize, and then you go back and you think it's going to be better, and it never gets better, right? So the volatility of this relationship never quit. It never quit. It just continued on. And, as we're raising our children now, I'm seeing the effects on those children. How his expectation for them to be absolutely perfect, and all they ever wanted was love from him, and he wouldn't give it. Oh, I know externally I used him to get out of this situation, to have the illusion of this protection and security, but really, I just opened the door for more havoc in my life. Now, no regrets. If I had to do it over, I'd still do it over, because I wouldn't change anything for those 3 children I have. So I would go through it again to make sure I had the same babies. On the internal part, I realized I married what was familiar. I married my own father. You know, I pretended, I told half truths. You know, I was now living the life of my mother in an abusive relationship, unhappy and miserable. Looking back, it just blows my mind, you know, that I'm a completely different person today. Thank God for that. Um, a big turning point for me was my children being abused in a day home. This was a home I was referred to by a friend. Um, I found out that this woman was drugging my children with baby Tylenol. They missed their lunch meals, and her twin boys abused my children. And probably they were abused themselves, because children don't know how to abuse other children unless it happens to them. They were 4 and 6, totally innocent, only enacting what was done to them. And that's how I found out these things. I did the right thing as a mom, went to the police. They did nothing. The police actually expected these little children to name out who their abusers are. Like that's ever going to happen. So they didn't do anything. The system was very broken, still is. People fall through the cracks all the time. I fought for my children. I had to take things in my own hands. I put my kids through play therapy. This is when I started to find out lots of things that were happening to them that I didn't even know about. The things that went on for the pressure from their father, you know, things that they could probably never speak out loud. I was in the middle of my own therapy too, for my own abuse as an adult. And, you know, we weren't allowed to talk about it in our home. My ex-husband didn't want to know anything about the children's abuse. He didn't want to know anything about what I was going through. I wasn't allowed to talk about it. And of course, you don't feel like any sexual intimacy at that point when you're dealing with that stuff. But that didn't matter. He'd just wait till I fell asleep and do it anyway. This caused more fights, more physical, mostly mental abuse. I didn't know what narcissism was until after I had left. And I started to look up some of the mental illness tactics that people use to control other people. Anyway, through this whole process, I lost many nights just thinking, you know, driving for hours, not wanting to go home. And I remember one night I was traveling home from therapy, and we lived out in the country, and there were lots of trucks on the highway. And I would just say to God, I don't want to die, but if I just drive into this lane, can you just let me sleep just for a long time? And then when I wake up, I don't want to remember anything that I've been through. Could you do that for me? I don't know how many times I thought about just moving into the other lane. And that's when I heard a voice. And the voice said to me, be a mom to your children. Take care of them the way I couldn't take care of you. And the next thing I knew, I was in my driveway. So after 2 years of going nowhere in this relationship, being a practicing Catholic person, I also was guilty of having affairs because I was so lonely. I decided I'd go see my local priest and spew it all out, say my repentance. In the next 2 years, I worked hard to make my marriage better. I tried to find ways to communicate. I tried to be soft-hearted. But he was a volatile, difficult person. And then once I knew it wasn't working, I stepped back and started to disconnect from that relationship. And he started to control me more. The cash, the resources, my decisions. And that's when I was introduced to this business that I now own and operate, right? And I knew it was a blessing from heaven. It was a shot to get out of a situation. And he tried everything in his power to destroy me and destroy my confidence and to tear me down as a human being. And my survival skills kicked in, just like they always do. That supernatural power I found, and I started to make a plan without even knowing I was making a plan. Anyway, I got my certifications done, opened up my own bank account. I started to set aside money. I also deposited money into our joint account so he wouldn't be suspicious. I decided to plan a trip to Disneyland with my whole family, the kids. We had this happy family trip. It was a wonderful time. I made sure it was a wonderful time. I played my part. I had fun with my children, don't get me wrong, but I did everything I possibly could to stay away from him. He tried. I just would make excuses, whatever. I have to pee, I have to this, I have to that, I got to check on the kids, everything. Anyway, I managed to get through 10 days, and then I knew when I got home I need to leave. And so when I told him that I was leaving him, he fell down at my feet and hugged my legs and begged me to stay. And I'm thinking, you don't even like me. Why do you want me to stay? Anyway, I still planned it, but then, you know, those brief moments of his kindness went away. So we lived in a small house. I was still in the same bed with him, and he would wait until I fell asleep. And he would come round the side of the bed and he would whisper vile things in my ear about who I was as a person and what I was like. And I didn't know how to not hear him. So then I just remember rocking and singing a song in my head, covering my ears. This went on for like an hour and a half in the middle of the night on the side of my bed. He just wanted to break me so I wouldn't leave. So I moved out. I did a day run while he was at work. So when that was happening externally, my entire plan was to protect myself and to protect my children and to get out. This is after 17 years. I was with him for 17 years. It's disgusting that it took me that long. But, you know, you lie to yourself and you think it's going to be okay. You can make it work. And he said sorry. And, you're back and forth, back and forth. Narcissists don't want you to be successful or independent. They want you in a place where they can control. This is the internal part, sorry. They want you in a place where they can control every aspect of your life. I had to get out to save them from that kind of life. So fight or flight, whether you realize it or not, you're preparing for what's coming. I didn't tell a soul, not even my best friend. I had two people help me. In the middle of the day while the kids were at the school, I packed a bag of clothes, a garbage bag of clothes for them, a garbage bag of clothes for me, a garbage bag of toys for them. What he didn't know is over the last 6 months, I was using my money to buy things to set up the new place. I stored it at somebody else's house. When you do everything in secret, it's because you fear something or someone could hurt you or harm you or your children. So we packed up with very little. It was a stupid move on my part, you know, leaving everything behind, things that had meaning, you know. My poor daughter, she would scoop stuff when she had time at her dad's place and hide it in her backpack and bring it to me to try and save things of my past, right? Like he took my mother's handwritten cookbook and burnt it. Like just things that had any kind of meaning to me, he would destroy. Anyway, so I move into this condo and I put the three kids upstairs. I gave my daughter the one with the master suite with the bathroom, and the boys got the other two rooms and shared bathroom. And I slept in the unfinished basement downstairs. This was the first night the kids were in bed. I go to lock the door, and as I'm turning the lock, I just start to cry. And I lean up against that door, and I sat there and I probably cried for a couple of hours. And I realized for the first time in my life, I actually felt like I was safe, and there was a place where I could be okay and I could be myself, and I didn't have to pretend to be something I wasn't. You have a lot of guilt when you uproot your family, even though you know it's not good for them and it's destructive. And you know you have to do it. You have to separate your children from that environment. It's drastic for them. And it made me feel better to give them a good place, even if I stayed in the basement. Those first 6 months were really hard, but also a time where I could learn to heal from some of the things that I was running from. And I started to work in the business on a more diligent level, started to find that fire within myself, that desire that I could have a better life. Externally, when you're in your mess, you can't always see a way out, and you're really afraid to make decisions or to take action or to try to convince yourself that things are going to change. Internally, on a deep level, you know you're lying to yourself. You know that you have to push through. You know that you have to do what's uncomfortable. And if you're really honest with yourself, for the first time, you have to look at all of it dead on. So now I'm going to talk about my time with my husband I now have. Poor guy. He's been through a ringer with me, let me tell you. So I knew Polly was my brother's best friend. We consoled each other because he was going through divorce. I was going through divorce. You know, he was the only guy I had met up until that point in my life that loved me like that, supported me, cared about me, wanted me to be successful. He's completely opposite from every other relationship I've ever had. And not that I had many. Um, but that kind of love came with its own dynamics too. You see, I was still broken, and so was he. So broken people attract broken people. You don't attract what you want, you attract who you are. So we got engaged, had a big fight. I threw the ring away, kicked him out. He didn't leave. We got engaged again. We had lots of fights. I kicked him out. This went on. I think I kicked him out about 7 times. Anyway, I was very angry. I didn't trust anybody. When we had a fight, that poor guy, like, you know, he would try and apologize, and I would just, eek, eek, eek. That's me turning the tap off on my emotions, right? And then there was nothing. It was like, I literally could not feel any compassion or any emotion for this guy at all. That's what it was like when I turned my feelings off. It was my survival mechanism, right? And then we add a little spice into that. So we're fighting all the time. And then, you know, it's the whole blended family thing. Now he's got two teenagers to deal with. They don't like him. He's taken place of their dad. He doesn't like them because I get caught up with them and he gets pushed out the door, you know. And so he's jealous of them and they're angry with him, and it's just a gong show in our house. So many things going on at once. So I just started to control stuff again. I controlled the environment, I controlled the children, I was managing everybody's behavior. I took his ability away to lead the family or to even grow as a person. You know, I basically just demasculated the guy because I needed to control my situation. And, you know, granted, he had a lot to learn too. He had his own stuff, but um, you can't have a healthy marriage with all that stuff going on. And, you know, eventually that worked for a while, but then the kids got older and, you know, they started to defend themselves and speak out for the way that he spoke to them. They didn't like the way he was treating them either. And, you know, it just got to the point where we now were looking at our relationship. Kids are leaving the house. You know, you're looking at this person you're with and you're going, like, what are you doing with this person? What is this person doing with you? Are we going to continue to live this life the way we're living it, or are we going to make some changes? Um, so, so we ended up taking a sabbatical in our marriage, a time off where we could not time off to split up. I'll talk about that a little later, but there's things you have to deal with in your life. That's the reality. And when I look at that from the external side, I see a pattern in my life, a pattern that either I control it or I run away from it, you know? And in this case, I would bury myself in work, make these stupid decisions. These patterns and curses would be transferred to me from the generation above, and I'm transferring these patterns and these curses down to the next generation. So internally, I knew I wasn't dealing with things properly. I was living in this fantasy world in my mind that it would naturally fix itself. I avoided the truth. And I also avoided the fact that I was chosen to break those curses in my family. I avoided that too. So now I'm experiencing some pretty good success in business. At this point, you know, my income doubled. I went from 100,000 to 200,000 in income. I thought, oh goodness, I got it going on. I've arrived. This is great. I had an office in Edmonton, office in Lloydminster, one in Kelowna, one in New Brunswick. Everything was going wonderful, but I wasn't responsible. I experienced that growth. Did I do good things with my money? No. I spent the money. See, I grew up in poverty. My parents used to take their paychecks, put it in 30 days of piles of change so that they could survive for the month. So I had no respect for money. I had no proper emotional connection with money. And so I spent it. We renovated the house. We spent $30,000 and took the kids to South Africa. I hadn't seen my family there, my mom, sisters, and brothers in 26 years. Seemed like a great idea. 5 weeks later, it was catastrophic. Things started to crumble. The broker that I trained out there, she was making 100,000 a year. She quit. Handful of people there quit. I got home. My Lloydminster office got poached by another company, changed the sign on the door. People in my Edmonton office quit. My business was annihilated. And I have to start over. So at that time, I was working with my brother in the office with his wife, and we were fine. But when his wife came to business with us, it was a whole other dynamic, a whole other energy. She did not like the fact that I benefited from the business they did. or perhaps there was some jealousy there. I'm not sure. But I had a high school education with a 53 average in math, making 6 figures a year. She was an accountant. You tell me. My relationship with her became very toxic. I cracked 3 molars from grinding my teeth at night. My blood pressure was 179 over 110. I was like a ticking time bomb. I had to get out. You see a pattern here? So I did a midnight run. And before that, I had to sign a lease for a new space. Was I making a good decision? No, I had an overinflated ego. I thought I could handle everything. Everything would be fine. I signed this lease. I didn't read it properly. I didn't read the fine print. And so I did this midnight run, moved out. I left the shares there, the money there, whatever. I just took my furniture from my office and I left. And then I start this new place, but instead of starting it with the same mentality that gave me the success I just spoke about prior, I started managing people, not leading people, but managing people. And the people who had committed to come to the office and plug in and take care of some of that expense, they stepped away, and I was left holding the bag a year later. So that year later was also the journey when leading up to me becoming a Christian. And I think that happened for a reason. So just, things happen for a reason, right? One of the soccer parents would say to me, ask me every week, you want to come to church with me? No. Do you want to come to church with me? No. I would tell her that every week. And finally, I said to her, will you stop asking me? And she says, well, will you give me a date? Fine. So I gave her a date like 6 months out. She called me a week before. I always keep my promises, right? So I went and I was like, these people are way too happy in this church. My thoughts are, if you give me some Kool-Aid, I'm out of here. Like it was just too much happiness going on. And I was so pissed. I was just like sitting in the church with my arms crossed. She was like, well, did you like that? Was it fun? And I'm like, yeah, it was all right. And anyway, we get in the car and we're driving back to our place. And Paul's like, well, did you like it? Yeah, fine. I liked it. My arms were still crossed. He goes, what is with your body language? What do you mean? What's with my body language? Like I was just so mad. And he goes, why are you mad? I don't know why I'm mad. But I just had this constant state of fighting against what was good for me and this rebellion. And he goes, well, I really liked it there. Can we go back? Fine. This was like my attitude, like a teenage snot-nosed kid, right? Anyway, and then we stayed there for like 5 years, at that church. My goodness. Anyway, but it all leads up to, I needed that for what was coming. Another run. So it's my birthday now. How are we doing for time?